recognizing that I can do something different. That I don't have to follow the same patterns that, in fact, the Bible says that if you actually like share, like your sins, with others, it helps you heal.
Shame is something that we do to ourselves, thoughts like I'm bad or I'm not good enough or I'm already this far. Why am I going to address it? Like this is insalvageable or is this impossible?
I come from a story of, church hurt, the feeling of abandonment, the cultural shock, the, respecting and honoring my parents' beliefs and rules, while at the same time experiencing a new culture and basically like choosing how do I want to live my life.
Why has God brought you here? And what do you think you are to bring to your family that maybe has never been brought or even thought about? I don't know if any of those questions have been coming up for you recently.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Into the Attic podcast with Karla, with Vanessa. And today we actually have two very special guests. They're our friends. I'm talking about Victoria Chile Gonzalez and also Andrea Lahood to have a conversation with us. Welcome into the attic.
Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
To have you here. Not only are we friends, you guys are also therapists. And you know us, we like to talk everything about healing and faith and growth. And one of the things that we usually talk about, it's our parents, right? And, our inner wounds, our inner child wounds. And today we wanted to talk about generational patterns and sometimes how those continue appearing, right? So we're excited that you guys are here. I know our conversation is going to be great.
Yes. And so first, let's start by getting to know you a bit better. Victoria, Andrea, what does generational patterns mean to you? And also, how has that shaped transgenerational therapy?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I also wanted to make sure we introduce our therapy to Bella, of course.
Can't miss her. She's always here.
So to answer your question, transgenerational therapy was really born out of my own journey of walking with two different cultures. I am originally from Ukraine, grew up in the U.S., married a Latin man, so I am just a mix of everything. And you're able to quickly pick up on how everywhere you go, everyone kind of has their way of doing life.
Yeah.
Whether it's relationships, whether it's marriage, or whether it's just doing family and you're single, and you just don't even notice how much you become a product of your environment. So the things that you think maybe your mom did that you said you would never do, all of a sudden you find yourself doing in your own relationship or in your own friendships. And so being able to take the time and to really assess of like, okay, what are the things that I am bringing into my present day life that I actually want to have, and the things that maybe I don't would be the definition of transgenerational therapy, and being able to really take analysis both in the things I want to keep, but also in like, how do I actually get rid of the things I don't want? And you can't just say I don't want them and they just magically go away.
Or you're just aware, like everybody's so aware, but nobody's really healing or doing anything or taking action, right? Yeah, that's so beautiful. It's funny you mentioned family, because I feel like when you start going to therapy, right? And I started going back in, I don't know, when I was 25 years old. I didn't really understand a lot of the dynamics of therapy, but the first thing that a therapist starts talking to you about is your childhood. Yeah. It starts digging, and you're like, why are you asking me about my childhood? My childhood was fine, So it's funny that when you start talking about that, they start digging into, how was your upbringing, your relationship with your mom, your relationship with your dad, What have you ladies seen, when it comes to seeking therapy, right? And just becoming aware, right, of some of our own patterns, and how do they tie back to our childhood? Like, what are those patterns that you usually see come up, when you treat patients, maybe, or even having conversations?
Well, I'm going to introduce myself real quick. So similarly to Victoria, I grew up in a bicultural home. So my mom, Colombian, Italian, and then my dad, Lebanese. So I'm the first generation in the U.S. And so when I think about like generational, patterns and wounds, I think of like the the story of like my generations. Like what did they live and what did they pass down to us? And I think answering your question about like what I see with my clients is like, what are the ways of thinking that they have now that really stem from like, what did their parents think? And then their parents think about that. And so there's just so much richness and complexities in our stories because it's really starts like way farther than when we actually think. So, so yeah, what was you had another question?
No, I was talking about like the parents, right?
Yeah.
Like how when you start seeking therapy, that's where the conversation starts.
Yeah.
You know, and we're today here also as friends, not just you as therapists, you know, and I know you both have your own story, so we're going to get very intimate here. But I think one of the things that we usually talk about, like, okay, our parents, right? How do we start getting curious about our parents? Because sometimes, like, I mean, there was a time that I was upset at my parents. Like, I didn't really want to know more. You know, I was just upset. So what are those steps that somebody can take, or what has worked for you, for example?
Whew, this is a loaded one for me.
This is
We're going into the attic.
Literally, yeah. Sometimes it's hard to, I think what's a struggle for me, it's like, how can I honor my parents, but also understand that they're like flawed and that they're human as well, but still honor them. You know, I think like culturally, I'm sure you ladies can relate to this. Like a lot of times, like our parents say like what happens here stays here. Like you're not allowed to talk about like family stuff outside the home.
Very common.
So that was like difficult in the sense of like sometimes, you know, going through things, you know, I had to keep things, you know, kept private, you know. But my parents, I just want to say like they're like amazing for coming to this country. Just like the amount of courage that they had to start a life here. And I think now, like in my early 30s and late 20s is when I started to learn more about their story. And even like preparing for this like podcast or even like the topic, like I had more questions about my parents that I never thought to ask, you know? So there's just like a lot there. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. No, you did. I mean, and that's funny that you brought this up because yes, I think we're all, you know, children of immigrant parents that came later in their years to a new country. I know yours are still overseas. And that on its own, you know, it's a whole set of, you know, challenges that what they had to experience, right? While having children in a new country, being in their 40s or maybe, you know, late 30s and experiencing life, right? And I think one of the things that I personally had to go through and also kind of talk myself through was having compassion for them and thinking myself as, okay, how would I have acted or reacted or, you know, gone through these feelings if I had children and I had to do what they had to do, you know, what would have been my reaction, right? And if there is a sense of, I feel like compassion, and that's the one thing that I know helped me at least, you know, go deeper into trying to forgive, you know, what wounded me or hurt me. Having that sense of compassion, right? That, hey, they're not perfect. You know, they try to do their best. You know, they probably could have done here and there a little better, but, you know, just compassion, I think, overall.
Well, I came, like you were sharing, my parents are overseas. I came here as a student a lot of years ago, like probably 18 years ago. And one of the things that I had to like also like learn was to see my parents as my biggest cheerleaders because they sent me here at a young age of 18 or like younger than that. And the other day I was talking to my dad and he was saying like, do you remember that you were the one to tell me I want to learn English and you were the one to tell me I want to start going to that school? And you didn't know that school is the one that I always thought about taking you, but I wasn't sure like how to. And when you told me that, I decided to work harder so I could help you get into that school.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Pay for that school, graduate with that international high school degree, so you could then go to college. But you remember that you were the one to tell me that you wanted to study overseas, and I'm like,
No, I forgot.
All these years I thought they sent me here because and it's interesting because for so many years I felt abandoned by them. But in reality I was like, man, now that I think about it, I think it was God already like working my way through here and all the things that I've been able to experience in this country, like not only professional or my career, my talents, but also ministry wise. I do a lot of ministry here and everything because God has positioned, like each one of us in different areas, right? Like therapy, like Carlita, she's an amazing, like real estate, and she helps many Hispanics and Latinos to build their own legacy here. And I present news, and I also use my talents when it comes to ministry. I love, because you were sharing, Victoria, that you prayed before coming to this podcast, and you said that you felt in your heart to share the story about Esther and how God positioned her, not only for her story, but also for the story of her people. So I would love for you to share about that with the leads.
I was actually thinking of that just even as you were sharing your own story, how you very much are like the Esther in your family, where God did position you and brought you to the United States for such a time as this. And I think taking the time to sit with that is so important because there's so many spiritual implications about, what is it that I'm bringing to my bloodline? Because that's also generational, right? There's generational bloodline that you're carrying, that you are expanding in the U.S., essentially new soil for your bloodline.
Wow.
So the story of Esther, something that I specifically was thinking about when Esther in chapter 4 was chosen to be the queen in replacement of the old queen, there came a moment where the Jews were in jeopardy, and her uncle Mordecai, so Esther was actually an orphan. Her parents were not there. So that just even tells you that her uncle was really her father figure. And he comes to her and tells her, hey, the Jews are in trouble. And if you think that you are going to escape this basically killing that was going to happen to all the Jews, don't think that isn't going to escape you. That is a part of potentially now your assignment to be able to really step into this queen that God has given you the ability to be able to now save your people. And I think something that's important when we're talking about transgenerational legacy, when we're talking about healing, is that God will place you in positions of authority. Wow. And part of that is a reminder to, just like Esther, not get lost in why God put you there. You have to remember that part of the assignment on your life in being able to break some of those generational patterns is being able to recognize, okay, why has God given me this position? What am I here for? So, for example, for you is, why has God brought you to the U.S.? He could have brought you to Australia. Right. He could have brought you to Canada, some other country. Why has God brought you here? And what do you think you are to bring to your family that maybe has never been brought or even thought about? Mm-hmm. I don't know if any of those questions have been coming up for you recently.
Yes, of course. I think part of the awareness that I was not being abandoned even helped me face a reality that I always say this for so many years. I always say this. I have shared in my therapy for so many years. I always kind of had a list of the things that if I have to go back to my country, this is what I'm gonna pack and this is what I'm gonna take. And then I got to a point that I had to be no, I can't try to keep my life in a bag, just ready to leave anytime. Let me commit. Why am I here to the Lord? And like you were saying, for my family, but also for my Hispanic people, I am blessed that in my church, I serve the Hispanic community. I translate as well. Mm-hmm. And to me, what has kept me very into this feeling of a calling, and also my own journey of healing, my own journey of, have this, I want to say growth spiritually, but also a lot of spiritual awareness in my life has been because I understand that I come from I come from a story of, church hurt, the feeling of abandonment, the cultural shock, the, respecting and honoring my parents' beliefs and rules, while at the same time experiencing a new culture and basically like choosing how do I want to live my life. And it's been a whole journey that now I'm able to like, not only to my family or my sisters, but also to many women and men, help them like relate with my story, and I can even relate with their story. And even right now, we're going through a very difficult time in the country when it comes to my community. And it's being moments of spiritually just, reminding them God brought us here. And as he brought us here, he's going to continue to sustain us, provide us, protect us. And it's going to be his will. And so far, his will, and we can all agree with that, has been good. So far, he has, and even Carlita can say yes to this. Like, there's many people that have been able to build legacy in this country when they came with almost nothing. So it's, I love what you're saying, what you're sharing that, because I'm sure that many women right now can feel like, hey, I am where I am because God has brought me here. And so far, God has provided.
That's so good. That's so good. And I think one of the things that sometimes we can appreciate is as we look back, right? That we, at least, in our Hispanic heritage, we tend to be very honorable of our parents. We hold a lot of honor for them. And in the middle of that, what I've also seen is that there is a lot of honor to them, but then at least on our generation, millennials, I don't know about you, but I feel like we also have a lot of questions. There's a lot of things that we're asking ourselves, like, where does this come from? Why am I acting this way? Why does this like reaction keep coming up? You know? And even in that, I mean, I have a huge family. We're like 40, right? And I love my whole family, uncles, aunts, and the times that we do get together, it's like a whole conversation about life, our parents, their parents, and it just starts coming out more and more. But one of the things that I do recognize is that, our generation of my cousins, my brothers, my sister, we ask questions because we want to see answers, but our parents don't. They're like, life was like that. So everything's like this. Our parents were like that. We honor them. We love them. And that's it. No more questions. And it creates this kind of struggle between, both generations on like, but you should want to know, but you should want to seek answers. It's going to show you more about who you are and why you were the way you were to us, And it's interesting to see the dynamic, but what do you guys see like between those two generations? Like, what have you guys seen, come apart?
I'm glad you brought that up because that's exactly what I was going to speak on, is first just acknowledging both of you and what you're doing here with this podcast and just speaking on these issues, because it takes so much courage to look at, where you've come from, the issues that the struggles you're facing now, and breaking those patterns. Like, it's not easy to break those patterns, and it takes courage because of what you're talking about, Karla. I feel like there is, I see and sense a lot of shame from our parents and their parents' parents, and that shame keeps them from really looking deep and doing the hard work and even talking about the struggle, And I think I was sharing with you guys, like, off camera, something that I've recognized in my own family is like certain topics are like taboo, and they just use like their behaviors, like, don't do this. Why? Just don't. And it's just like, but why? And I think us as like millennials, or especially the generation like after them, like we're just curious, and we know there's something going on and we want to know why. So I think a big component to that is shame. And like, there's different cultural, I think, components to how people deal with shame. I'm curious to know like how your family deals with shame in comparison to like the Hispanic, Latino culture. I also have like the Lebanese culture. And I thought back to, an assignment I was doing in grad school about like I'm sure you did this too, like the genogram, the family tree. And I'm like, so Dad, like, I want to know the juicy stuff, like what addictions were in the family, like was there any like mental illness, like what was going on in our family? He's like, nothing. I'm like, Dad, there has to be something. Like, you're one of 9 kids, like there has to be something, And so he's like, nothing. I was like, man, like I don't know. And so like now I have a lot more questions because they didn't come from like literally Lebanon like had so many civil wars. And like he grew up in war and then came here at like 18. And so like I'm like, Dad, there's definitely trauma in your family. And he was just like, no. So I'm just curious, what shame looks like in the Ukrainian culture.
My story was a little bit different. That's a good question, though, because in my world, I thought everything was fine until it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so you alluded to this earlier, where you were saying there was a point in my life where I kind of just was mad at my parents. So if I was your therapist, I would ask you, like, what was happening for you at that time? I imagined something difficult. So going back to my own story, I, was trying to follow the family rules or the cultural rules that I was given until those rules didn't work. So in my situation, I got married and then unfortunately ended up getting divorced, which at the time was like the worst thing that could have happened to me. I completely had no preparation for it. Around me, I think I knew maybe like less than a handful of people who had ever been divorced. So I was like, oh my gosh, not only is this my biggest fear, but why is this happening to me? I grew up with parents who were married, and my mom passed away this year, but like they were married until death do them part. And same thing with my siblings and most of the other people I was around. So it was like I was given the right generational, wisdom, generational, just encouragement, blueprint for how to live my life, and it didn't work. So either my parents gave me the wrong blueprint or I went off somewhere. And that's actually what led me into therapy, because I was like, I need to figure out what is happening in my life. And unfortunately, that's usually when most people actually start doing the digging, is because something has happened in their life where they now have to make sense of it. And I honestly think most people don't even ask. They just kind of like follow blindly. Well, my parents did this, I'm just going to do this. My parents told me, to go marry this person, I'm just going to marry this person. Like, and it's not just relationships, it's finances, it's friendships, it's careers, it's our health, like how we exercise. I mean, for example, I didn't really exercise because my parents didn't exercise. I had to teach myself how to exercise, right? So like, that's all the type of stuff that you start looking at when you're in therapy, and you're like, wait a minute, like, why do I do all these things? And even some of the shame, I think like the shame could be so embedded in you that you could carry that shame and not even know you're carrying it.
Well, those are the silent killers. In my story was very similar to yours, where I felt like I grew up, with a really good blueprint, like be good in school, do good, be a good girl, have good grades, go to college, all these things that you would seem like, okay, once you pass through all this, you're going to have the happy life. And then where my, patterns have shown up the most, having in relationships, and that's when I had to go back to therapy and be like, okay, why are all these things coming up? And there you start seeing all your patterns, right? Like, how do you react, right? Where does that come from? Like, how do you feel? Like, what, when you do have conflict, what does that look like for you? And all that comes back to your childhood, and how you responded to what you saw, what you didn't see, etc. So I think for sure when it comes to like patterns, just recognizing them, it mostly comes back to your story, right? It was interesting because one of the things that I remember from like, in this process of recognizing the patterns, right? I remember I went to therapy, and one of the things that, I was in a relationship during the time, and one of the things that I had such a, kind of conflict to do was to bring my problems to other people, right? And the first thing that I recognized, and they were bringing that up, right? Oh, how are your parents, your family and whatnot. And one of the things that was very heavy in my family as a whole, and I'm talking about not just my parents, but like, my uncles, my aunts, were los platos rotos se limpian en casa. That means, like, whatever is dirty, you clean at home.
Los platos, la ropa sucia. Just the laundry is done at home.
Well, I don't know exactly how it was. I thought it was platos sucia. Se lavan en casa. Pero bueno, the whole thing was that, you just fix everything at home. So this whole process of like sharing anything with anybody else, being in therapy, or being, maybe another couple, or maybe, somebody else that might be, maybe have more wisdom in relationships, it wasn't heard of, and that was one of the lies that I kind of had to like, recognize, okay, where did that come from? who did I hear, who gave me this idea that was exactly how things needed to be. And then, recognizing that I can do something different, that I don't have to follow the same patterns that, in fact, the Bible says that if you actually like share, like your sins, with others, it helps you heal.
Yeah.
Right. So, just thinking about that and how different our generation does that now versus their generation then, it kind of tells you so much about how, we heal versus what they used to do in the past.
Which is just hide it. And you cannot heal what's being hidden. You cannot break a pattern if you don't recognize there's a pattern. Which brings me to remembering in the Socolita and I, we made a church, but we ended up becoming closer through salsa classes. And then, and then one day, we had a conversation where we realized this space should be like, open to more women. And then here we are 2.5 years after our first meeting into the attic. But I remember that as I was getting closer in my friendship with Carlita, one day I was sharing with her about like, and this person did it and I do this. And no, this person did this, so I did this. And she was like, Vani, I still need to get to know you more to understand if this is just an isolated reaction that you're having. Or it's a pattern in you. And then time passed, different situations, different circumstances. And I'm like, and this is what I did. And she's like, okay, I'm seeing a pattern in you. You fly. You don't fall runner. You don't race. You fly.
You're right.
And then, believe it or not, like I found myself like telling her now, like Kalika, and I didn't run. I stayed. Like I don't run anymore. And like it's interesting because as I was also sharing with you, like I'm going from a claustrophobic to I'm having a claustrophobic thought right now, but I am not a claustrophobic person. I can, I can react differently. So my question is like, can you share a little bit more? Because, for example, you become first, you say, I want to study journalism, but then you become a journalist in the process, right? So for you, now that you're both therapists, right? Now you're doing transgenerational, like, therapy for women and men. How can a person that right now is listening to us that is saying, I think I can see probably a pattern here in my life. How can they approach it? What would be that thing that you would like to say to a woman, even to a man listening to you right now, to like, hey, come and approach. Come and find out your patterns, come and approach. Because we want people to heal, right? And if they don't know their patterns, how can they do it?
I think first is addressing the shame. I think a lot of people struggle with the shame, and that doesn't allow them to come forward to even talk about it. Shame is something that we do to ourselves. Thoughts like I'm bad, or I'm not good enough, or I'm already this far, why am I going to address it? Like, this is insalvageable, or is this impossible? Thoughts like that. And so just taking a moment to recognize that, like, whatever you're doing that you want to stop, at some moment served a purpose for you to survive a threat you were facing.
Wow.
And so really approaching it through curiosity and compassion, I think, Kadma, you said this word, compassion is just like in my mind resonating. And that's like, I think where the true healing begins, when we look at our patterns with compassion. Like there was a reason why I didn't get angry in my family, because there was a lot of unspoken rules about like if my anger would come up, it would be shut down.
Yes.
And so anger was an emotion that was scary and threatening, so I had to learn to shut it down. And so now, like in my own journey, I've had to face or to confront my anger. And so I had to look at it with compassion. So long story short, if you're listening, like it's okay. Your patterns were there to help you survive in your family. And just as your parents also, like that's how they survived in their own family as well. So
that's beautiful.
Don't be afraid. I mean, it's scary. It is scary. We have a disclaimer there, repeat, like things can get rocky and bad before they get good.
Yeah. I love that. And I wanted you to speak, Victoria, more about the role of your therapist, because into the attic, we become aware of things. Because when we talk, things are sometimes hidden in our attics that we haven't ever like shine some light on them.
Right.
So we help each other like that. But then there's a work that needs to be done so we can actually break those patterns. So what is the role of a therapist in that, Alex?
Yeah. Going back to your example with you and Karla, we just use that as a good kind of framework. You were having these moments and Karla was watching you, right? She was also a really good friend to you, and she was able to see like, okay, at first I don't know you, I'm not going to make any judgments, but as she got to know you, she was able to start noticing your patterns. So as a good friend, was she there for you? Probably, right? As these moments happened. But at some point she realized, okay, maybe there's deeper work that needs to be done. That's more than just I'm a friend who's going to nudge you in the right direction. Maybe there's some deeper family things that are happening to you that she's able now to witness because she has relational equity with you. So a lot of times it's actually our closest friends who actually are our best sounding board to be able to help us to get ourselves into therapy, because it can be scary and the shame is definitely there. So I would say like a practical tool is like, hey, like ask your friends, like, hey, what do you think my patterns are that I keep repeating? Because they're going to share it and you're hopefully not going to take it personally because you know it's going to come from a place of love. Yeah. And then as far as the therapist, you definitely want to make sure you find the right one. So if you've tried therapy and it didn't work, go to another therapist. Don't feel like therapy didn't work just because you tried somebody and they just were not a good fit. The other thing is therapists do niche into things. So if there's a specific thing you're looking into, like relationships, they just want to go to therapists that is their niche. That way they're truly speaking to that issue. Just like if you're going to go to a doctor, if you have heart issues, you want to go to a heart doctor, not an arm doctor, right?
Expert in their
area. So those are a couple tips. And then the last thing is there's different ways to do therapy, right? You could, if finances are an issue, you could use your insurance. See if at work you have benefits on your health insurance to be able to use your insurance. Additionally, therapists will also do super bills for you where maybe they don't take your insurance, but they'll be able to still give you some paperwork to reimburse you for some of the out-of-pocket costs or expenses you've done. So don't feel like, hey, I'm in a low place. I know I am, but I can't afford it, or I have too much shame, or I have like a lot of the things that I think I notice the most, and I wish people came into therapy earlier and later, is that people wait too long. They wait where they're literally on the brink of divorce, or they wait until they're on the brink of like, you know, suicide or something just really, really hard. Yeah. And then you really are in crisis. And I think that's probably like, at that point you should be in therapy. But the idea is, to your question, I hope you don't have to get there in order to come get help.
Right. You know, that happened to me, and I kind of gave this example in another episode where I took so long to go to a dentist because I was having like a pain. I was like, I think it was my wisdom tooth coming out, and I was like, somehow it fit, you know, great. Like I didn't have to go to get it removed. And then pain, and then pain. And I was like, maybe just accommodate itself. Pain. And then I was like, I had to go and get like emergency. I didn't have to go to the ER, but I did have to get an emergency appointment, which cost me like almost 2 or 3 times, because I was like, the pain is unbearable. And then he told me, we have a situation because the teeth were too tight. Now we have to these needed to be removed. So we're gonna remove the wisdom teeth and also heal the one that was next to it. And then he asked me a question. I was like, I knew somehow, I thought it was not bad, but at some point I realized this needed a dentist. And then he said to me, why didn't you come earlier? And I said, well, first, I thought it was just going to accommodate itself. And then I said, and second, I was a little bit ashamed. You know, like this wisdom should have been removed a long time ago. And he said to me, I'm a dentist. Who else was going to help you with that? Like, I'm the one who sees, like, even cases that you wouldn't even imagine exist, horrible things. And you think this was going to make me feel like, you know, like, judge you for this? Like, I'm the only one that can heal this. And that moment made me realize how many things in my life I didn't want to take to God, which was the ultimate one who can help me heal by, also, helping me find the right therapies, addressing not only the work when it comes to patterns, but also the spiritual work that comes attached to it, to break generational patterns. And I think it's that, like, sometimes we don't want to go to get the help because we think, like you were saying, maybe it's too late, or maybe I'm going to be able to fit this somehow into my life, even if it's sometimes painful, but the pain always comes to the surface.
And I think also, like, your ego gets in the way, because sometimes you think that you could get it done on your own, or like, you're going to be able to fix it. There is like such a lack of humility. I mean, I feel like women are better at it than men, but then I heard the other day just a beautiful reflection on how sometimes, like, the explanation of each word can really, like, trigger a change on somebody. Like humility, some people see it as, just like thinking lower of yourself, like just being very, like, soft-spoken and whatnot, instead of seeing it as humility, being like, no, I have so much more to learn. Like, I haven't finished learning everything that there is to learn. So it, like, puts you in a state of humility, and that's huge, because then if you do that, then you consistently remain curious about, everything, right? Like, not only, especially when it comes to your emotions and, like, your patterns, right? Like, why do I do the things that I do, right? And it starts kind of, like, getting you involved in this, like, searching process, where hopefully, you get some clarity, right? Hopefully you get some clarity without having to also find a solution to, like, every single problem in the world out there.
And I think humility can be approached, honestly, if you understand that, like, you need to have a humble heart to recognize that God is ultimately the one that's going to heal us, but he also brings community. Like, I wouldn't have recognized many things if I wouldn't have had, like, past relationships, a great friend like Karla, my sisters, also, the work of a mentor that we did, like, that was very powerful, but also therapy. So it's a humble heart is the one that recognizes that where God has me planted, he's also bringing people around me that not only are my community and my friends to just, go out and celebrate life, but also to be, to be mirrors for me and also to be part of the journey. So, like, have you found, like, a pattern when it comes to, like, therapy that maybe, like, you see women trying to isolate themselves in their own problems instead of, like, trying to find community? And if so, how have you made them feel, and I think this is a key word, safe?
All the time. I think that happens all the time. And curious what you wanted to share about that. But the thing that comes to my mind is being able to understand that you are a triune being, right? You are a spirit, you are a soul, and you are a body. And our spirit is perfect, right? Our spirit is what's going to go back to heaven when we die. But it's our soul that often gets wounded. It's our soul that carries the generational traumas for patterns that we like or don't like. It's our soul that a lot of times the enemy will come and plant a little seed in there of rejection or abandonment in your situation, or when you were having your relational situations that were happening to you, whatever the seeds that were planted into there, and then eventually those seeds sprout and they start creating realities in your life that may have not been there prior to the situations that you experienced that were painful. And then out of that, we start creating stories. So because I was abandoned, therefore I cannot trust XYZ people. Yeah. And what a therapist does is helps you to differentiate between your spirit, your soul, and your body. And your body, there are physical elements in your body as well. Let's not forget the body, because if you're feeling, for example, depression or grief, like, you will feel it in your body as well, where you might not want to get out of bed, or your body feels 100 pounds heavier than it is, or you might have you want to sleep more. You want to sleep. So there's other regulating your nervous system things that you could do. Maybe you can comment more on this, because I know that's been your jam recently. But being able to understand that you are three of those things and how to separate them. Because I think my biggest pet peeve, if there was one, is that people think, well, if I just read the Bible, everything will just go away. Like, I wish it was that simple. Like, there comes a point where you do need to do some of that soul work or soul care to be able to have those healthy relationships, to have the healthy family dynamic that maybe you wanted to have but just didn't know how to create it.
I'm gonna save that because I'm gonna ask a follow-up question to you on that, but I'm in on this.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
Okay. I think so. I'm trying to rethink your question, but the isolation piece of women and why it's sometimes hard to open up. I think it comes from, the same word shame, right? We're scared that when we share, we're going to feel rejected, judged, criticized, because I really think like we are delusional, that at least I sometimes think that I'm delusional, that like I could be perfect, or like I need to have these expectations. I have high expectations on myself. So if I come to you with like a struggle, it's like I'm admitting that like I'm not perfect. But that's true. I'm more living a Delulu land. So I think for me, when I broke that vulnerability, or I don't make sense, when I was able to be vulnerable with other women about like my family, is when I actually moved. I was the first person in my family that moved, and my siblings, from here, Miami, to South Carolina to go to school. So that's where I saw my patterns of my family, because I literally was separated from them. And then I saw other people's realities and experiences with their family. And I think like building that trust with someone, like, initially, like how you guys are saying, like it started out salsa dancing, and then like an activity can ease, break people together and bond them. And then little by little, different experiences build that like trust relationship to where like you can open up the door to vulnerability. And vulnerability is like giving somebody the ability to hurt you, and so that's what's so scary about being open, right? So going back to your question, how can how do therapists help with like the safety piece? Yes. So actually I want to change the word. A mentor reframed safety for me to security, because if we think about it, like we're safe right now. Like let's say we're in group therapy. Like there's no like tornadoes. There's not like wild tiger.
You're not in imminent danger,
right? Like safety, like we're good. We're safe in our bodies, right? Like nothing horrible is happening, but like we're not secure in sharing. Our anger, our sadness, our guilt, our fears. Because going back to childhood, when those emotions came up, depending on how your parents responded to them, is how we chose to respond to ourselves, right? So going back to my anger, I saw anger like screaming, or like, I saw that anger was bad because of how people treated other people and not a nice way. And so, and even when I wanted to assert myself, like anger is, an emotion where it's necessary. It serves a purpose and a need of like establishing a boundary. And so sometimes, not like, again, like parents, they have, not to like say it was their fault, but yeah, there's responsibility. There's responsibility where, sometimes they shut down my anger. And so, so now sometimes it's still hard for me. I'm still breaking that, where like I need to confront somebody, set a boundary, and it's hard.
Yeah.
But that's because I learned through my family that it was not allowed. I couldn't speak up. And so, women, I think women have a little bit, I don't want to say this. They're more courageous. They're more courageous with vulnerability. Yeah. Like, we're more like, women, we're more emotionally in touch. Yeah, and we talk more than men. Yes. Like, I think scientifically we say more words than men.
Yes.
Victoria, much more. Yeah.
And that must help us to release some of whatever we have going on inside.
Yeah. So, and also, like, I'm sure you guys could chime in on this, but, like, in the community of women, like, there is sometimes like that competitiveness, but I think it's out of like insecurity, but really like I think more so now. And again, I want to just highlight what you're doing, which is beautiful, like elevating women in a culture where it's like competitive almost, and just like, yeah, catty or gossip. I think that's another block to like isolation with women. Is like, are they going to talk about me behind my back? Are they going to like, you know, I tell my teen girls sometimes, like, choose your friends wisely. Like, how are they talking about other people around you?
Yes, it's spoken.
You know, so that you can also protect yourself, because you don't also want to like divulge information.
I was teen girls. You said teen. You were with teens.
With also in like the church community. So I transitioned before working with Victoria. I worked with teens.
Oh, that's
and so now I work with teens like in like the ministry capacity, which is more fun for me.
I think it's so important to, like we were saying, sometimes, you know, women, they tend to talk more between their closest friends. But if you don't have the community, or maybe you do have friends that, you know, are more social, not very, not very deep into understanding, you know, who you are, because everybody wants to feel understood and feel seen, right? And not everybody can hold space for that. And I think one of the things that comes up a lot, as you were saying, you know, we're in Miami, that happens here, probably in a lot of like larger cities. You have this competitiveness, and you have, you know, empowerment of women, you know, doing great things. But one of the things that I heard from a psychotherapist was that sometimes you can try to motivate a woman to do so much, you know, going into the entrepreneur world, you know, do sales and do all these things. But if you don't get to understand her story, like the deepness of her story, how it impacted her, there's no way that they're just going to change like this, you know, because there's different backgrounds, there's different stories. And yes, you know, you could have all the excuses, they would say at some point, right? But it does impact, you know, it does impact. And then so you get really real with that first, you know, you're going to have all this subconscious, you know, things that stop you from getting to your highest potential. So I feel like having these inner conversations, you know, outside of doing the other, you know, practical, more like, you know, empowerment of women that goes on, it's super important, because otherwise you can get into the spiral of like, oh, I'm doing really good, but then I'm doing really bad, but then I'm doing really good, and then I'm doing, you know, it's because you never really get to the root, you know, of what pulls you from doing that.
And not only that, but I think we're in a constant work. Like, and then I love that. I love that we have a God that has unlimited grace for us, unlimited goodness for us, that our lives are a constant work. And we should always like look back and be like, you know, I'm glad I did this work. Now there's going to be a constant in the Bible that says we're going to go trial to trial and victory after victory, but that's because our character is being molded.
Yeah.
And I think what I love about Into the Attic gatherings, because he has also brought so much for Karla and I, is that there we become aware. Mm-hmm. Aware of things that are in our hearts, aware that we're not alone. Mm-hmm. And then we also get to be understood. And I think like most of the times people are looking to be understood. And when it comes to action, they're looking for kindness. People to be kind, to say, wow, I'm sorry you went through that. I would have never imagined that you went through that.
We see this whole thing between faith and the clinical world, right? And how they intertwine at some point, right? You mentioned that before, how sometimes people think that just reading the Bible, that's what's going to heal them, you know? But then we also have the other side, right? Where you're like, you go to therapy, you do all the steps, you to the point, and then there's still this deep, you know, sense of, I need more, you know, or the healing that needs to come from the spirit, you know? Mm-hmm. So how do you discern, you know, when you need both in your own personal experiences, you know, when does one come before the other, or how could they both, you know, interlock?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So I'll share from my own story. When I was going through my divorce, if somebody would have just told me, hey, to go read the Bible, I've been like, okay, like, what story do I even read? You know, because, I mean, yes, there's stories in there. I mean, I read a lot of Ruth, for example, talk about redemption story, right? God really did speak to me talking about redemption. And I've had spiritual mentors in my life, right? Had spiritual, strong spiritual friends that I felt like, you know, I could go to. But even there, I felt like I I just couldn't unpack my soul in the way that I could with the therapist. That not only is the therapist there solely for you, because a lot of times if we're talking with friends, you know, it's hard to even, you know, give them that time because you have the 2-hour coffee, and then you're like, if you just take up the whole time, then it almost feels like you're treating your friend like a therapist. And so there's even that dichotomy. But going back to the therapy question, is I was able to go there and understand both my spirit and my soul in a way where, okay, here's spiritually where maybe things were right, but in my soul, here's where things were wrong, right? Where were the lies that I was believing about myself or about relationships? Where was the stories I was told of what I was supposed to do in the position of a wife that I was, but then losing that position through the divorce? And those were the questions. I couldn't just sit and listen to a sermon and everything just went away. Like, I needed to wrestle with those things. I needed to understand, well, how did I even see myself as a healthy wife, right? Along with the Bible scriptures, being able to piece it together in a contextual way and being able to heal and forgive. And yes, we talk a lot about forgiveness at church, but I needed somebody to just really walk me through every step. And I just can't imagine a different place than a therapy to be able to do that. I know a lot of people go to their pastors when they're going through hard stuff, and I think there's a place for that too. But most, well, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of pastors don't always have clinical experience or don't have any kind of counseling. Maybe they take like one course on counseling in their seminaries if they go to seminary. There just really isn't. And I've heard this from pastors too, where like, I don't feel equipped to address some of these things. So I feel like, where do you go when you feel like you're bleeding on every side? Or maybe if you're not, but just things keep happening that you don't want to happen.
I do feel praying about them, like, oh God, take away this depression, but yet you don't approach it to understanding what is the rules, right? That needs to be healed, or, you know, but for a spiritually, you know, chain to be broken.
What about you, Andrea? Yeah, I think like what you were saying, like the persistence, like you've tried everything, but there's still this block. And just, so I'm trying to conceptualize for many viewers that aren't, I don't want to say like Christianese or anything, but like be guided by the Spirit. And I truly believe that God can heal anything. Any wound we have, whether it's physical, emotional, He can heal us. At the same time, we need to learn practical tools to live out the healing, right? That isn't like taught at church necessarily, right? Or even in schools. Like, I never took a class about how to communicate effectively. How to properly regulate your emotions. Like, no one teaches you that. There's no class. That's like one of my goals, is to teach people those basic things, those practical tools, so that they could integrate it with their faith, you know? So I think I want to just say that, keep it there. I think it's very complex. Like, we're like spirit, body, mind, and they're all integrated. So sometimes it is difficult to decipher, okay, is this like a spiritual attack, or is this a mental health issue? And I think like assessing the wound, like, okay, how did the wound occur, can maybe like help decipher, like, is this more spiritual, or like physical, like what happened, you know? But I think either way, like, doing both is essential, right? We should seek therapy, find out, okay, where is this coming from? What are the things that I'm doing to contribute to the problem? And then also bringing it to the Lord, because He's the ultimate healer, and He can do things in the spiritual realm that we can't do in the physical realm. That's beautiful. If that makes any sense.
That makes total sense. Girls, I know we could stay on this topic forever, but you know, we have to cut it. But I want to thank you so much for being here, just for opening up your heart, sharing a little bit of your stories. I know a lot of us could continue having this conversation. I'm sure we're going to have you back again, but I just want to appreciate your time here.
Thank you, ladies, so much. Definitely, it won't be the only conversation we're going to have. Thank you, because you've also been subject to the attic, and like, it's just for us, it's just a way of saying, it's important to have these conversations. It's important to have people that can be, those mirrors, or like my mentor says, that second angle camera that can help us see these. Probably good. Yeah. She's like, interesting. Are you ready to see the other angle of the camera? I'm like, okay. But I love that. Thank you so much, Victoria, Andrea. Thank you for coming into the attic with us.
Love it. Thank you for having us.